Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Crossroads, and I'd like to welcome my guests from Canada. Welcome, Robert Klinck.
Hi, Arnie. Good to be with you again.
No worries. Pleased to have you, Robert. And Wallace Klinck. Welcome, Wallace.
Hi, Arnie. You're looking invigorated. You're looking cheerful and bright and inspiring. That's nice because I'm having a rather dull time here in Western Canada. It's raining outside. It's murky and cloudy, and it's not very cheerful, really. It's
Okay.
a bit cool too, actually.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Wallace, because this weekend is the first time this year. Today is the first day of winter for us,
Oh,
and it's the first time that I've lit the fire. I lit it last night. Just to sort of make the house a bit cozy. And I was up this morning. We've got a top of 14. Now that's saying something in itself that it's the top of 14. So that means the average during the day is less than that. And so yeah, the weather is gloomy here. We've had plenty of rain. My tanks are full, and the veggies are growing. Now we just sort of find the balance between sunshine and rain. Now, our subject for today, and it's interesting because there's perspectives actually happening politically. And I think that they're actually going under the radar, and the news services are not actually concentrating on the ramifications of what we're on about. I'm going to touch on this is in the Conversation website, and this illustration, this graphic next to our Prime Minister, is showing that the National Cabinet, this is National Federation Reform, and the National Cabinet is part of that. Now, this is unprecedented in Australia's history because the executive was above Parliament but reported to Parliament. But this National Cabinet is over and above that, and it's actually a replacement of heads of government departments and premiers. And in my view, it's a seize for power. They're actually jumping at this to seize for power. Now, the other illustration website I wanted to touch on again with the conversation was in regard to the emergency laws during the coronavirus pandemic that have been passed not only in Canada but also in obviously in America, Britain, and all the free nations of the world. And so governments are actually doing certain things under emergency powers, similar to a war situation, even though we haven't seen a war, but they're doing it. And of course, they're using the COVID-19 as the ruse for it in order to seize power. But at the same time as what they're doing with seizing power is they're actually expanding the finance. They're expanding our debt levels. As communities, our debt levels are just going through the roof, and government is handing out funds, but increasing debt. Increasing debt. It's not like it's new funds created from new money. It's funds coming from new debt. So we're being indebted further to the financial system, and it offers us no respite. There is no redemption in this method. We will not come out of this. We're seeing our industries deconstructed. We're seeing the middle class essentially being decimated with lack of income, a lack of disposable income or cash flow. It's all being, if you like, emasculated in front of us, and we just haven't stopped long enough to take a breath to look at it. But I believe that the small players in this, it's really, really going to take a huge toll. Your thoughts, Robert Klinck?
Well, you mentioned war, Arnie, and the terminology that is applied to this COVID-19 crisis is very militaristic. They are often talking about it in terms of fighting a war against the virus, and they use other expressions that are certainly related to waging war. Well, war has always been a revolutionary policy. And that's why one suspects that maybe many wars have been started for the purposes other than those represented to the public, because in the course of wars, tremendous sociological changes have been introduced, and societies have emerged at the other end, and they're transformed, and not necessarily for the better. So I think that this COVID crisis is being used to revolutionize society. it's virtually admitted that that's the case. Many people have spoken about creative destruction being the guiding idea right now, and the destruction is overwhelming. It's unprecedented. You know, all these businesses going under, and I don't know. We don't have published suicide statistics, but I suspect that there's a terrible situation that way. There was a report out of the United States the other day by a doctor who said that they have had a year's worth of suicides in 1 month. So we're not getting that kind of news because the media is so cooperative in presenting the government take on what's going on with COVID. But there are very, very many collateral damage, forms of collateral damage that are coming out of it for sure. What is being contemplated is really a restructuring of society. You mentioned this group in Australia, this new formation in the upper level of the executive. Well, we have a similar thing in Canada, I think. There's a fellow named Gerald Butts, who was a very close collaborator of our Prime Minister Trudeau. He was largely responsible for the election campaign. He had to resign a couple of years ago, and it was under pressure that could have resulted in criminal prosecution, I think. Well, he's been brought back, and now he's going to be heading our re-emergence from the COVID crisis. So they always, you know, after these people who resign in disgrace are always held in the background for a little while until they assume that people have forgotten their discreditable behavior, and then they bring them back. But this will be the same kind of thing, I'm sure. It's going to be a different kind of society that will emerge on the other side of this COVID crisis. And we've been warned of this by the many people who speak of the new normal.
Yeah.
It's going to be something that we have never experienced in the past, I'm sure. Yeah. It's going to involve a constant monitoring, constant surveillance, constant threat that they can identify you, if only because you've rubbed shoulders with somebody in the street who after that is reported as having some kind of virus. So it's really a terrifying prospect, and unless it is thrust back, and the only way it can be thrust back is by public resistance, then we're stepping into a future that is something people are not going to enjoy.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robert. That's certainly an excellent opening summary. And I might add that this national cabinet going on in Australia, over and above Parliament has been suspended, and this national cabinet is made up of public servants and politicians, but it's also got industry representation on it. And so to me, what it is it's the nexus, the coming together of capital and government, the nexus of communism and capitalism. It's coming together right in front of our eyes. And it's not a pretty sight, because in the end, the only option that's left for the individual is to be obedient. Otherwise, you'll be cut free, cut loose, but you won't have any sort of support base whatsoever. And that means that the oil production will be withheld from you. Government will see to that. So the options are not pretty. Your thoughts, Wally Klinck?
Absolutely, Arnie. It's often been quoted that war is a time when people will put up with or accept far-reaching changes, which they would never, at least in the past, would never have accepted, because they would have seen no justification for it. But what if you can create a situation where there is a crisis, or a presumed crisis, or a feigned crisis? There's always a large number of people who, I guess, are fundamentally insecure, and they tend to look up to authority and to authority for their security, and so they will accept incursions upon their freedom that they would not normally do, and which is not a normal thing for humans to do. I mean, our position is that people were born free; they weren't born slaves, and so that we are being told all the time that this post-viral period is going to be marked by changes that we have never seen before. In other words, that the world will never be the same again. Well, I think that that's a bit gratuitous. I don't know who has the authority to make that particular decree. But yes, so we're looking for the period that follows this initial viral so-called crisis. And we're told that they're going to relax it, but you see, this again fits in with a Marxist dialectic. You move forward, and then you move back, which puts the people's guard down. They think, oh, well, I guess the period of stringency or authoritarian administration is backing off. But it's only to put people off so that they're not really prepared for the next stage, which will move further on and be increasingly pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a strategy, and it's a devious strategy. It's a dishonest strategy, and there's nothing honorable about it because they're not being honest. They're trying to literally fool you into thinking that you're going to have a better time when they actually know full well that they're going to control you more and more as time passes.
Yeah.
And this is the way we're moving, and it's only through a movement, a revival of the spirit or soul of the nation, of the people, that there will arise a resistance to this authoritarianism. Which I mean, let's face it, we don't have a perfect set of institutions, but we have struggled over many centuries to improve, the fairness of the law and the unbiased administration and things of that nature, fairness. And we don't want to go back. We want to advance it. We don't want to slip back into a more primitive, authoritarian type of administration. That would be a retrogression for us culturally, unless you think that men were born to be slaves.
No worries.
Which I certainly don't, and social credit is exactly the policy which would reverse that tendency for us to become slaves. And that's why social credit has been so badly criticized and reputed and ignored and slandered, because it is a mortal threat to those who are anxious to centralize administrative and legal powers over us. It is a mortal threat to the power mongers amongst us, those who are driven by the will to power, because we want to restore power to the individual so that the individual can choose himself how to structure his life, so long as he doesn't incur, restrictions on other people. As long as we all have more chance to structure our lives and to pursue our own ends, that is an enhancement of freedom, and that is an enhancement of life for humanity. And we want to strengthen that. But the way we're going more and more to crises which are being claimed as the legitimate basis for increasing, legal restrictions upon us in all sorts of different ways. And it is coming about because certain people want to play God.
Yeah.
They seem to think, they forget that they were not They didn't create themselves. They didn't create the universe. They didn't create us. We were created. And whoever created us must have had some sort of a concept, a purpose in mind. And I think it is rather forward of us to move forward and literally reject whatever that power is and try to appropriate the power that naturally resides with it.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. It's in the what you're saying there, Wallace, and some of the things that came to mind. One of them is is when Christ was taken to a high mountain and shown the kingdoms of the world, and said that these would be given to him if he would bow down and worship Satan. And of course, Christ rejected that. He rejected it, and Christ rejected power in all situations. He was the role model, or the archetype, if you like, of service. He was service unto death, and that's the illustration. It's from this Christian philosophy, from the, if you like, the example set by Christ himself, one of service and one of duty and one of personal responsibility, that insists that the individual is unique, that the individual is created by God himself, and that the individual, because he is created in the image of God, therefore he should be free to exercise their own creative instincts. Under a totalitarian regime, all of these instincts are suppressed. This creative pulse that's within each one of us, our desire to live our own life, to find expression the way we choose, all of this is lost to the totalitarians, who insist that their conception of reality is more valid than anyone else's. And it is an abstraction. It's a thought that's in their head. Now, I might remind our viewers that yesterday was Pentecost, receiving of the Holy Spirit. Now, what we're looking at here is we're looking at a battle, and the battle is the individual or totalitarianism. The individual exercising freedom in a moral and responsible environment, or totalitarianism where the elite are not held accountable for their behaviour or their decisions, where the elite are completely irresponsible and unaccountable. Now, Christianity teaches that each and every one of us is responsible for our own personal choices and behaviour. And that's why we have laws, that's why we have juries, that's why we have ancient laws and freedoms based on that. All of these things are part of our culture, part of our tradition, and these have been built up over thousands of years. And the fact is, right now, the elite are attempting to destroy all of that cultural legacy from their point of view, just simply for power, some sort of vain glory that they think they are so above all others. They are so more equal, as in George Orwell's Animal Farms. Some are more equal than others. They are so more equal that they can rule over the entire world. Your thoughts, Robert Klinck?
That's exactly right, Arnie. And they have shown that they are setting up systems for world control. We used to have, decent search engines on the internet, and they've all been corrupted now. You can't use them in an effective way to get information you're looking for. You're going to be guided along paths that are controlled. You can look for pages and pages on a Google search, and you won't get anywhere near what you're looking for, and you'll often find you're in some area that isn't even related to what you're looking for. So they started out years ago, and this was actually an amazing system, and it was a delight to use, and they have undermined it. Now, why would they do this? Because they want to take away the freedom that system was giving people. An amazing thing. And well, I don't know if you've heard of the program that Ivanka Trump is involved in, but she's supposed to be working on a scheme to set up a world registry of all potentially employable people. And when a job comes up, there will be a matching of the job with the person. Well, this is a level of centralized planning that I guess maybe writers of science fiction could have conceived of, but who would have thought that we're even thinking of the possibility of such a thing today? It's really astonishing. We're going to be going into radical changes, and the excuse for these will be the virus we're in now. That's a great excuse for world control. And then there will be also the excuse of climate change, which has been worked on now for many years. And that is a pretext for world government, because climate is, you're influencing climate if you're in one country, in adjacent countries. So this gives a perfect pretext for supranational government to intervene. And another thing that's going to be there is this now long sought principle of sustainable development. Well, sustainable in whose eyes? It's technocracy again. It's some scientist who is going to be prescribing what the possibilities are for the development of the world. So right now we're going into a period where there is a tremendous drive to centralize power at the world level. And it is remarkable that politicians of all stripes and in every country virtually are capitulating to this and supporting it with their words and their deeds on a daily basis. There is virtually no opposition. So how can this be? There's some force that is controlling this. And the force is the money power, because the money power is what determines policy. And there might be something else behind it. There could be physical threats even. We know with the example of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal in the United States that there is a system of blackmail of important people in society. So we have to be very mistrustful of our leaders, because they're subject to all these influences: threats, money enticement, and blackmail. So we have to wake up to the fact that the only people who can beneficially alter the course we're on, which is going to result in our becoming slaves of an international control grid, is for us to act as individuals and put some pressure, a lot of pressure, on the institutions we have that are supposed to respond to that pressure, in order to stop this drive for centralization of power.
Thank you for that, Robert. That's vitally important what you just said. I've got a bit of a reverb coming through. I'm just going to cut across to our website, and I'll highlight that in this Actionist Corner, which you'll find here on the left-hand side there, in the Actionist Corner we've got 3 documents by the Club of Rome, and if you make it your business to have a look at those, you'll see that this is a long-term plan. It's not new. It's certainly not unpublicized. It's there. It's there for you to read. It's there for you to consider, and it goes back hundreds of years, because really in this revolutionary period, its origins go back from before the French Revolution, and in order to pursue world control. And this demonic hand, if you like, that's over and above inordinate power, yielding to our politicians, to our bureaucrats, to our industrial leaders. And in this, of course, is frustratingly, there is an enormous void, and that is our spiritual leaders are saying nothing. They're saying nothing because even in those realms, in those avenues, those corridors, they're subverted as well. So we really are in dire straits. It does come back to the individual. It does come back to a regenerated individual. And as I said, yesterday was Pentecost. It's that power over and above what individuals by themselves can do. And it's where God himself can inspire you and empower you to do those very things that young disciples did when they were around our Lord. And look at the change that they brought about. It was no worse then than it is now. The same caliber of people received the Holy Spirit and were empowered. And surely that is our prayer, to receive the Holy Spirit, to be empowered, to actually do our Christian duty at this time. We are born of this age. This is the time in history where God Himself has chosen us to do these tasks. So it's up to us to do our Christian duty. Your thoughts, please, Wallace Klinck.
Yes, there's no doubt about it. If we're going to live the life that is possible for us to live, and which presumably we were created for, then we have to be an active part of it. We have to want it, and we have to seek, communion with it, and we have to be responsible, which means being honest to the last degree, as far as possible. And so, if we want to have the good life, the kingdom and Christianity refers it to it, we have to stop rejecting it and start seeking it and start implementing it, and stop bowing to mammon, bowing to the love of money for its own sake as an abstraction, and start concentrating on real life and a system of accountancy and money which actually reflects that rather than actually impedes it, which it does today, because there's always a shortage of money with regard to productive assets, primarily because there is a shortage of money to obtain the results of these productive assets, because business has to sell in order to respond, and it will only respond if there is real demand. And so this is the critical, this is the real blockage in the system, and that is consumption. We don't have enough money for consumers to obtain what has been produced, and to do it in a way that allows the producer to recover his costs and to literally liquidate the cost of production within each complete cycle. Because today we try to do it by, we actually try to liquidate the cost of today by borrowing from an uncertain future, by borrowing against what we think or hope we might be able to do in the future. But the thing of it is, we've already proved that we can do it when we produce these things today. Yeah. And there should be no reason in the world why we should not be able to access those things.
I just want to touch on, Robert, before I cut back to you, and that is touch on our website, ALOR website. That's the front page. Now, Wallace is talking about being able to liquidate the costs that go with industry in order for us to buy what we produce. It's so important. We should be able to buy what we produce. But because of the confiscatory nature of the existing financial system, then of course we never can. So we have to borrow for tomorrow in order to buy what we've already produced. And so this is the anomaly. Now, on our website, I've built in a whole swag of archives, Social Credit Archive, the PDF archive. So I've separated the books from Social Credit because there's a lot of PDFs there, a video archive and a podcast archive. Now, this is a new initiative that's starting just this coming Wednesday, 48 hours. Freedom Potentials is the website. The podcast will go into the archives, and the videos that come from that recording will actually be placed in BitChute. This website, The Crossroads, we've got our video archive there, and that will go into Bright Eon. And then, of course, our historical videos will be kept in YouTube via video channel there. So I'm just letting you know that these are the new archives we've just built in the website. The podcasts are now part of our front page, so you can actually download or listen to them, including the videos. So they're placed, the latest videos will always be placed here. And then if there are audio or podcast recordings that are important, then I'll be placing them here so that you can actually download to see what our historical speakers have said, what historical Australian League of Rights and international speakers have said about our current situation that are relevant for today, and of course are on target. So this gives you some idea of the services that we are providing and how important it is to avail yourself of those. Now, Robert mentioned the problems experienced with search engines, and yes, that is true. And the fact is, if you wish to, you'll find it in the adverts on the back page of On Target on our front page. You can actually get a DVD copy of the website with all the archives, all the social credit archives, the On Target archives, all of those PDFs, and also the podcasts. You can get those files onto your own computer and then put a desktop search engine onto it, and then you're independent. And so the desktop searches that you do will provide you an enormous amount of research opportunities. The website is something like 10,000 files, and some of those files are 1,000 pages. There are some books there that are 1,000 or more pages. So we really are getting up into a large archive that's available, and that's currently, I think it's on 3 DVDs, and you can put those files on your own computer so that you can actually start deconstructing the narrative. You can start interpreting what's actually going on politically from past precedents, and look to those archives to actually reveal the truth, the disseminating truth of the current narrative. Your thoughts and closing comments, please, Robert Klinck.
Yes, you mentioned the Club of Rome, Arnie, and these people who want to take our future in their hands and dictate what it will be have a disastrous history of making projections. If you read the original book of the Club of Rome, The Limits to Growth, which I think was published in 1970, and they were saying all the aspects of our development that would lead us to disaster within a certain period. And none of these projections have come true. They don't know what they're talking about. They're just putting out a propaganda line that is intended to induce fear in people so that they will go along with these big plans. It's something that is remarkable that they, as Wally said, they seem to think that they are God themselves. I don't know if they genuinely believe this or they're just dishonest, but all these projections have proven to be false. We're supposed to be, 10 years away from the end of the world if we don't deal with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This sort of thing was put out. Well, this is pure bunk, and anybody with half a brain will realize that. And other projections too have proven to be totally unrealistic. We're living in such a period, I think, that I don't even trust statistics that are issued by governments. In 1984, George Orwell talked about how all these statistics would be falsified. We know that in communist countries they've been falsified with their 5-year plans, where everybody had to exceed the 5-year projection or they get in deep trouble. So they were all inventing imaginary numbers in order to protect themselves. But it created a totally false representation of society. And I think that actually we're probably about in that position now in the Western world. People will possibly remember when just, I think, one day before the towers came down on 9/11, the Pentagon said that somehow they had misplaced $2.3 trillion. Well, this would suggest that there's some sort of serious accountancy problem in the American administration. So all these numbers are played with in order to produce a psychological effect in the population. And really, the people who are issuing them cannot be trusted. They've demonstrated that repeatedly. One interesting thing that might emerge from the crisis we're going through is a more realistic appreciation of people's attitude toward work, because the pressure that has been on people to find a job in order to have an income, even when the evidence from the progress of the productive capacity would indicate that the amount of work that humans have to do should be continuously falling. Well, now you have a large percentage of the population who are actually not working. And it's a confirmation of psychological studies that have been carried out in the past that indicated that probably around 85% of people were not satisfied with their jobs. And this is why we're seeing a lack of enthusiasm, perhaps, on the part of many people to return to their jobs, because they were not things that they were inherently interested in. So this is a shakeup that could have some beneficial effects. The only trouble is that the government is going to hold out these stipends, and in the end, this is just going to be a trap, because what the government can extend, it can withdraw, and they will make eventually, because they will claim that their ability to borrow has run out. This is not true, but the way it works, it's going to result in tremendous debt obligations on the population in the future. And so they can always plead that there's no more money. They've been doing this for as long as people can remember. We can't build a bridge because we have no money. We got the men and the materials and everything you would need from a physical point of view, but there's no money, even though money is something that is created out of nothing at the whim of the financial system. So, well, we cannot trust the people who are in power, and we cannot trust all these bureaucrats and technocrats who are pushing us along in the direction toward now a world government. And therefore, if we want to return to any kind of realism, we have to reject their schemes and not allow them to impose this world dictatorship that has been in planning for, as you say, Arnie, hundreds of years, possibly, certainly since the days of the round tables and so on, with Milner and his gang in the end of the 19th century. They were specifically oriented toward establishing a world government, and they've worked with it. We worked on this project behind the scenes ever since, and it seems now to be coming to fruition. They haven't given up on it.
No, I bet they haven't. Thank you for that, Robert. My thoughts on that are that the National Cabinet are referred to in Australia, as I said, is made up of politicians, bureaucrats, most importantly bureaucrats, and industrial leaders or advisors. And the fact is that those industrial leaders or advisors are actually marketing their products to the government. They're marketing their products. Now, in regard to the climate change fiasco, the models were shown, the hockey stick models were shown to be a complete fabrication. They were shown to be manipulated data and very poorly assessed. And of course, since then, we've found that in Australia, specifically, Bureau Meteorology are actually tampering not only with the instruments, they've changed the instruments over from a physical instrument to a digital instrument, and now they're adjusting the readings based on that. And of course, it's baloney. It's all bunkum. It's all bunkum. It is entire propaganda, and it's no different with this COVID-19. The actual projection, the models predicted in Britain, are shown to be deeply flawed, and the individual concerned, apart from his personal indiscretions, was responsible for other fiascos in history. So you can look up his colourful history in your own time. The point is that these are deeply flawed and they have vested interests. So it's not a clean slate. It's nothing like a clean slate. We are not looking at the scientific method here. What we're looking at is propaganda to achieve a political purpose. And we've got to recognise that from the start. And unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, but we are this time of history, we've got to recognise that essentially we're being controlled by criminals. Your thoughts and, excuse me, closing comments, please, Wallace.
Yes, Arnie, and even when honest people have unnatural power, they can make mistakes, and those mistakes can be really extensive and disastrous. When government makes a mistake, it affects everybody. When an individual makes a mistake, it may affect a number of people, but it's limited in its scope. And so that is one reason why decentralized control of policy is so important. Because if you have a large accumulation of aggregation of good decisions, it's going to be down to the credit of society, to the well-being of society. And no, we have to understand that things like this corona thing, the viral so-called threat that we have. I know one nurse said just a couple of days ago, I don't know what all the fuss is all about. It's just a cold, you know. And I mean, in fact, it appears to be a mild virus. And on the normal course of events, when viruses are allowed to take their course, they usually last for 3 or 4 weeks, and then they go into state of remission. Now, the things we're doing, I don't know, you mentioned Great Britain. There's an Irish woman, she has a PhD in virology and in immunology. She has worked for the Max Planck Institute in Germany. And many, I think, for quite a long time. And anyway, she's highly qualified, and she came out very recently with a really controlled but devastating criticism of this, the way this virus is being handled, or the way it's being dealt with, the way human beings are being dealt with in order to, allegedly, to fight the virus. And she said it's quite unnatural. And it actually, in the end, makes things worse, because we've had an outbreak of all sorts of diseases that we did not previously have, since we've gone heavily into the vaccine mode. So she was suggesting more normal, healthy ways of living. I mean, this woman is highly educated and she's very qualified. She's not in any way quirky or superstitious or anything like that. She's very qualified. And I think that there's the doctor down in California with his colleagues who have done something somewhat similar. I think that there has been a gradually increasing body of serious medical people who've come out with pretty devastating criticisms of this. The claims that are made for the virus and the claims that are made for allegedly necessary steps to deal with it. I think it's going to collapse of its own irrationality, but you never know. We can be quite irrational as human beings sometimes, to our great disadvantage. At the same time, we build a culture that has been an enormous achievement and advantage to us, and we don't want to have it destroyed by people who are more concerned about exercising their power and influence over their fellow men and women than they are about actually doing something to expand life.
Beautifully put, Wallace. Beautifully put. That it's been a very good forum today, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, I will find out the name of that lady. I think I know who it is, and I'll place the link below this video in the Crossroads. So thank you so much for joining us, Robert and Wallace Klinck.
Thank
And
you again,
thank
Arnie.
you. Thank you, Arnie.
Bye-bye.
It's been a privilege and a joy.